Welcome into this special edition of Pigskin Perspectives, specifically focused on previewing the college football playoff. We are, as of recording, basically a day away. This will be released very close to New Year's Eve, so very close to a day away from the college football kicking off and deciding who the national champion will be this year. The last year of the 14 playoff, of course, changes coming next year as the playoff expands to 8 or 12 teams, I should say. A lot of beginnings and a lot of ends here in this playoff. Four, I'd say, deserving teams get here. It is Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama will be the ones lifting. One of them will be the ones lifting the national championship trophy in Houston in basically a week's time, little over a week. But for the end of the 14 playoff, I think we got most likely the four best teams that we could have got. Obviously, there was a lot of complaining that Florida State didn't get in. It is what it is. Time has passed. It's being recorded after they lost 66-3 in the Orange Bowl again. That result does not matter and does not implicate on Florida State because they had basically one starter playing in the whole game. And that just, you can't push a narrative based on that, given those stats, that it just doesn't work out that way. Would they still have gotten blown out in the playoff with starters? More than likely. But here we are. Four best teams, and let's get into this. So we will start off with the Rose Bowl. It's a 5 o'clock kickoff from Pasadena. Should be immaculate weather. I think it's going to be like a high of 65 in sunshiny Pasadena, California on Monday, as it is the number one ranked Michigan Wolverines going up against the fourth ranked Alabama Crimson Tide. This will be Michigan's 21st appearance in the Rose Bowl and their first since, I believe, 2007. So the 2006 season going into 2007. For Alabama, it will be their 9th total appearance. That is including their one appearance in the BCS national title game in 2010, because that was held at the Rose Bowl, and I technically consider that a Rose Bowl game. Even though it wasn't the technical Rose Bowl, I still consider it that way. Michigan coming into this game undefeated, 13-0 Big Ten champions. Really haven't faced a true tough test this year. The closest game would be that Ohio State game where they walked away victorious at the Big House at the end of November. Steamrolled Iowa in the Big Ten championship, and that's how we get here. Alabama coming into this game 12-1, their one loss back in September against Texas in Tuscaloosa, but their spot was clinched in this playoff with a somewhat convincing, I guess I would say. They dominated that game basically start to finish in the SEC title against Georgia, which has earned them this spot in Pasadena. This should be a very intriguing game. A lot of storylines go along with it. You have the Michigan sign stealing scandal that's kind of fallen by the wayside since the playoffs started. You can take your picks on why that might be, but there's no really reason to debate that today. You have Alabama, Nick Saban chasing his 8th national title at Alabama, I believe, which would be a record. There's no two ways about that. That would be a record. Both teams have very good quarterbacks. I wouldn't say either are great. They're both good. Both J.J. McCarthy and Jalen Milroe. We're going to get to some stats about them in a second. Michigan coming in, best defense in the nation by far. Again, the stats will say that Alabama defense still good, not great. Could be a turning point in that game. And this is potentially, for what this all is. Final playoff with 4 teams. This is about as classic, I guess, it's a basketball term. It's as classic as a blue blood matchup you could get in this playoff. You have the 2 most winningest teams. It's not the way to put that, but that's how it came out. They're the 2 most winningest teams in college football. Michigan just passed that 1,000-win mark back in November. Again, we'll see how many wins they still have come whenever the NCAA investigation's over, but for now, they're at 1,000 wins. Alabama, I believe, sits in the 940s. So, I mean, it's a big gap first to second, but it's as big of a classic matchup that you could get in this type of game. This would be like getting Kansas and Duke in a Final Four matchup. That's about as close as we can get here. I believe these are the 2 teams. If you're including teams at the FBS level right now, 2 teams with the most national titles, if I'm not mistaken. Alabama has 19, Michigan has 11. Again, numbers can be argued on both sides. Alabama claims the national title from the 40s where they had 3 losses and finished I think 21st in the AP poll. Michigan, you can argue 97, all that. There's some other questionable ones in there. You can argue national championships on both sides. Both teams claim them. It's fine. We're here to claim one true national champion with this playoff. And it's going to be interesting to see how this game plays out. I believe it was Jim Harbaugh said at Media Day, this has the potential to be the game of the century. This is not topping the 2006 Rose Bowl between USC and Texas, the national championship game. That game will most likely never be topped again. There's various reasons for that. Most likely will never be topped again. This, like I said, blue blood matchup, you got a Michigan defense that we'll pull up the numbers right now because we got it all here. Their scoring defense, they're allowing average 9.5 points a game, first in the nation. Absolutely insane stat to have it in single digits. Something rarely you ever see. That's just how dominant Michigan has been this year. Again, going back to the sign stealing scandal, all that stuff, you look past since that has been released, yes, Michigan has given up more points. But Michigan has also faced better teams in that stretch than they had in the previous 2 months of the year, in September and October. Michigan basically faced nobody. So that's why I think sign stealing or not, those numbers were going up in November. I'll argue the same about J.J. McCarthy. His stats have dropped off since the sign stealing scandal. He's playing better defenses in November than he did in September and October. Those numbers were bound to fall off. Do I expect them to fall off as much as they did? No, I did not. But here we are. It's going to be January. Stats in September and October don't matter if you're lifting the trophy in December and January. And they've already lifted a trophy, both of these sides, in December. They're both trying to be the one that lifts it in January. So if we look at scoring offense, of what these teams are both averaging points per game, basically, it's right around the same. Michigan is averaging 36.7 points per game, which is 14th in the FBS. FBS has 133 schools, so they're right near the top. Alabama's averaging 35.1, so that's at 17th. So they're right around each other. Not a huge difference in scoring offense there. Total yards, Michigan is sitting at 4,947 yards, which is 62nd in the FBS, where Alabama is sitting at 5,215 yards, which is 51st. Not the greatest in numbers there, but I mean, your total yards don't matter if you're getting points. So yards per game, again, if you're getting points, it doesn't matter how you're getting them. Michigan is right around averaging 380.5 yards a game, 70th in the FBS. Not great, not terrible. Kind of right around the midpoint, midway. But again, if they're getting points, all that matters. Alabama yards per game, averaging 401.2 yards. So that is a bit more. That's about 20-ish more yards than Michigan. That's for 52nd in the nation. So they're just right outside of breaking top 50. With this game, offensively on both sides, Jalen Milroe is going to have a career game, because what you can obviously see the scoring or the defensive stats right now. Michigan has a very, very good defense. Jalen Milroe and those receivers and that running back room are going to have an outstanding game. There's no two ways about it. I don't think Michigan is going to have faced a better offense this year than this Alabama offense. I know you can make arguments about Ohio State, but I think Jalen Milroe is the better quarterback than Kyle McCord. I think the best quarterback Michigan has faced is Taula Tagovailoa from Maryland, and Jalen Milroe is better than him. Jalen Milroe has that running ability. Michigan's going to have to watch for that. Taula kind of exposed that a little in that game a month ago, basically. J.J. McCarthy on the other end. The defensive stats for Alabama are good. They're not Michigan good. He's going to have to look like September J.J. McCarthy more than November J.J. McCarthy. I think that's going to be hard to accomplish for him, because you're not facing Bowling Green, East Carolina, or UNLV in this game. Now, UNLV, very good season. Not taking anything away from them. I'm just saying Alabama's defense is not them. Alabama's defense is not that Michigan State team that you put 49 points up against. This is a team where you are going to have to be precise on every pass, every play action, every option run you are going to run. Got to be precise on it, because this Alabama team will capitalize on those mistakes. So looking at that scoring defense, already told you Michigan right around giving up 9.5 points a game, which is an insane number. Total yards they have gave up this year 3,116, which is second in the nation. Again, pretty good number. And then yards per game, average that they're giving up 239.7, which once again sits second in the nation. Again, outstanding numbers for a very good defense that Michigan has had this year. Alabama's side, they've given up right around 18.4 points per game, which is 16th in the nation. Again, very good. Alabama standards, not as good. They usually would expect to be up there in the top 5, but again, it's still very good for a playoff team. Very good. Total yards they've given up this year, 4,073 yards. That's 19th in the nation. And yards per game, they're giving up right around 313.3 yards, which is also 17th in the nation. I think the biggest factor in this game, coaching. Both of these coaches are two of the top in their field right now. Nick Saban, obviously, the greatest college football coach of all time. He has the rings to show it. He is what Bill Belichick is to the NFL. Not the downfall of Bill Belichick, the Super Bowl winning Belichick from just a few years ago. Jim Harbaugh, love him or hate him, he has at least built a staff around him, where, as has shown this year, when he had to sit out 6 games, things can continuously roll on like he's there even though he's not. That is the signs of a great coach. When you can step away, and I'm not saying Nick Saban doesn't have the same thing. I'm just saying just a few years ago, it would be hard to believe saying that about Harbaugh, because that team was just a mess, to say the least. Seeing that has shown how he's progressed the past few years. So this is more, I think, going to become a tactical game where each set of coaches is going to have to decide when they have to go that extra inch, run that extra play, basically, and try to figure out where they can finally one-up that other team. And, you know, it's hard to go against the best in that situation, which would be Saban. And I think that's going to be a key for this game, is the coaching and how you're going to push that to that extra limit. Given that, this is such a hard game to predict, because when the sportsbook opened, when this game was announced, right after on Selection Sunday, Alabama opened up as a 3.5-point underdog. It immediately tanked to 1.5. It stabilized there for a while, saw it go up to 2, back down to 1.5. I've seen it go down to 1, back up to 1.5. We're currently sitting at 1.5. Michigan's still a 1.5-point favorite. I really don't know where to go with this game. If Michigan's defense puts up another outstanding game, there's nobody, I think, stopping them. Defense wins championships. But you can't avoid the fact Jim Harbaugh has not won a bowl game since 2015, I believe. His first year at Michigan, they won what was then the Buffalo Wild Wings Citrus Bowl against Florida. Since then, I believe he has lost every bowl game they've been to. That is including the past 2 playoff games, one against Georgia, who won the national championship, and one against TCU, who got obliterated in the national championship. That has weighed heavy on my mind in this prediction, which is leading me to believe that Alabama is going to find a way to win this game. I don't know how. I think it's going to be on the coaching side, like I said. But Alabama is going to win this game. It's going to be close. I don't know if it's going to be the highest of scoring games. I think we're looking at like a 28-24 type game, somewhere around there. And Alabama just get it done at the end. And Nick Saban moves on to that national title game. So that's going to be my official prediction. 28-24. Alabama moves on to the national title in Houston. Now, of course, there is another playoff game to be had, as we have to decide who that winner of the Rose Bowl is going to face. And that is the Allstate Sugar Bowl, live from the Caesars Superdome in New Orleans. That's an 8:45 kickoff in the Superdome, which is a 7:45 kickoff local time. It is going to be the number 2 ranked Washington Huskies taking on the number 3 ranked Texas Longhorns. Well, first of all, Washington's the home team. This crowd will not be a home environment. Obviously, given the Big Ten's affiliation with the Rose Bowl and Michigan's affiliation with being good back in the 40s and back in the 50s, when the only team that went to a bowl game from the Big Ten was the champion, and it was the Rose Bowl. Michigan was never going to the Sugar Bowl. So it does suck from Washington's perspective that they should be at the Rose Bowl technically as the home team, closer home environment. It sucks, but Michigan was the 1 seed. They got to pick first. They were never choosing New Orleans. It was always going to be Pasadena. This is going to be a very pro-Texas crowd as they play in the Sugar Bowl for their 5th appearance. Their last one was 2019. They played Georgia, won that game 28-21. That was the Sam Ehlinger, we're back moment, and then they weren't back. Texas comes into this game. They are 12-1, Big 12 champions for the final time as they move on to the SEC next year. They're 1 loss to their rival Oklahoma, who will join them in the SEC next year. And then we have a number 2 ranked Washington team, also coming in undefeated, 13-0, won the Pac-12. They beat Oregon in that title game, just a great back and forth game, making their first appearance in the Sugar Bowl in their illustrious history. And this, again, I've already gotten to the home field part. I do feel like Washington got a bit shafted there, but again, Michigan was never not going to the Rose Bowl. There were points, during the whole playoff thing that Washington would have ended up the 3 seed. If Georgia just would have won, Georgia would have stayed at 1, Michigan would have been at 2, and Washington would have been at 3. Georgia would have 100% gone to the Sugar Bowl, and we would have had a last true Rose Bowl between a Big Ten champion and a Pac-10, 12 champion, whatever you want to call it. Pac-8, Pac-10, Pac-12. Yeah. Obviously, that didn't happen. Circumstances changes. Washington is in New Orleans. The same would have happened if Oregon would have won, if we're honest. Oregon probably would have ended up most likely the 3. I wouldn't have been surprised at all with them moving Texas up to 2 and Alabama stays at 4. Because they want that Alabama-Texas game as the national championship. Just saying. This very interesting game. Texas blew out Oklahoma State in the Big 12 title game. They've basically controlled their games since the Oklahoma game. They have that huge win against Alabama in Tuscaloosa in September. It's not the same Texas team as it was in September. It's not the same Alabama team as it was in September. They've both gotten better since then. Washington, their two closest games technically were the Oregon games because that was the best opponent that they've faced this year. They've conquered them both times, basically playing the same physical type of football and exposing weaknesses in the Oregon defense. Washington, although I say the Oregon games were the closest games they've played other closer games the rest of the season. And by the rest of the season, I mean every game since September. They haven't won a game by double digits since September. So they've struggled with Arizona State, Stanford, Washington State, Oregon State. I think Cal is in there. Most of their conference schedule, basically, is what I'm saying. They've won by single digits. Given the Pac-12, it was hyped up at the beginning of the year. It started off really good. And then it kind of fell apart and fell to the wayside, became the Pac-12 that we, usually know. It does worry me that Washington truly hasn't blown out an opponent. Yes, I know they're winning games, so that's good. They're winning games. They're doing it whatever means necessary. It worries me that they struggled with Arizona State, struggled with Stanford, all those Washington State, those 3 specifically because they didn't make a bowl game, which I know bowls aren't as much as they used to be, blah, blah, blah. It worries me that way. I know Texas had some scares in there, but I wouldn't say they were as much as Washington's scares were. But we can't go by the wayside. Michael Penix Jr., Quinn Ewers, I think were two of the better quarterbacks in college football this year. Neither of these teams are here without them. They're both just very, very good quarterbacks. Arch Manning, I know people will argue endlessly that Texas would be here with him. No, they wouldn't. Malik Murphy, maybe, because he did step in those games, and they struggled a little, but stepped in. Let's get to the stats here first, because there's some interesting things here. Scoring offense for Washington, they're at 36.7 points a game, which is 14th in the nation. Texas sits at 35.1, 17th in the nation. So these teams, just like Michigan and Alabama, kind of even. Total yards, offensively, Washington sits at 4,947 yards, which is 62nd, which actually kind of surprised me. I feel like with Penix airing that ball out a lot this season, kind of thought there was more there. Turns out that there was not. Total yards for Texas, 5,215, 51st in the nation. So kind of like Texas or like Michigan and Alabama, Washington, the higher ranked team, just like Michigan, has a lower number than the lower ranked team, which is Texas in this situation. But it's not far off. It's not hugely far off. I think, as we said, Alabama's 52nd in the nation for total yards. Texas is 51st. So they are technically the highest of the total yards in this 14 playoff. Does that mean anything? Probably not, because you're still scoring, still winning games. Yards per game, Washington's right around 380.5, which is 70th in the nation. Texas is 401.2, so 401, they sit at 52nd in the nation. Again, both of these sides, with the way they've played this year, kind of feel like they were better than those numbers, but we just ended up in this situation where I guess it doesn't really matter because they're getting the points that they need. Scoring defense, this is somewhere I think there's a major discrepancy in these stats. Scoring defense, Washington is averaging giving up 23.6 points per game, 51st in the nation. Total yards, they gave up 5,160, which is a huge outlier compared to these other teams that sits 106th out of 133. Yards per game, they're right around 397, which is 93rd in the nation. It's odd because, like I said with those games earlier on in the season and all these games in between, those games were close, but there wasn't a lot of scoring. The final of that Arizona State game, I believe, was like 15-7. Then you look at a game like the USC game, I think they gave up 42, if I'm not mistaken. So it's gone back and forth, basically, for Washington. There's a reason this game sits at 62.5. This game is going to be a lot of more high scoring, even though Texas's defense sits 12th in the nation in scoring defense, averaging around 17.5 points per game. Still think this ends up being a higher scoring game. They've given up 4,182 yards, which is 27th best in the nation. In yards a game, they've given up 321.7, which is 26th in the nation. I think I don't really know what a lot of people are expecting from this game, but I think it's going to be right around that 62.5 number because both of these offenses, very good. Very, very good. No opt-outs, obviously, nothing like that. Defenses aren't the greatest, but aren't the worst that they could be. So I really don't think Washington has a huge chance in this game. I think Texas's defense is just better than that. They're going to top Washington in this. They're going to slow down Michael Penix, and Washington's defense kind of just going to fall apart a little in a few moments, and it's just going to be Texas taking over. And that's going to be the huge key in this game, is for Texas to just find a way here, basically. For a official prediction, I guess I would say, like I said, I think Texas win this game. Final score, I think it's going to be more higher scoring. I'm going to go like 42-28, something like that. I think that's what we end up with, and I think it's going to be Texas-Alabama in the national championship. A rematch of September. We can obviously get into predictions when that happens, but for now, we're not there. So that is it for this college football playoff preview. Hopefully you enjoyed this preview episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you just stumbled across this video, found it intriguing, found this breakdown interesting, thank you, first of all. And you know what? Click like, click subscribe. We can do more content like this, especially with the NFL playoffs coming. There's a lot more stuff to do with that. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure you tune into those college football playoff games, and let's see if these predictions end up coming out right, because who knows what could happen.